Well, if RTX 4090s weren't expensive enough for you, you could look into NVIDIA's new RTX 6000, which is a workstation card with 48 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's coming in, it's listed for $7,350. This has 18,176 cores with 300-watt TBP and 91 teraflops of horsepower. Now, if you're like, wasn't there already an RTX 6000 and it was cheaper than that? There was an RTX A6000, and that was on the previous generation, and now the newer generation doesn't have the A in front of it. So very easy to understand naming system here, I know. Anyway, I know most of you guys from my channel are focused more on the gaming graphics card market than the workstation market. Now, you can game on workstation cards, but that doesn't mean that, you know, that is the optimal reason, and the pricing doesn't make sense for that use case. Now, according to the article I've pulled up here, it looks like this has 11% more cores and SMs than the 4090s. So this is more powerful than a 4090 and has double the VRAM, and it has, you know, the Pro drivers and all of that. So interesting stuff, but I think at this kind of price point, if this is a card you need, you probably already know that, and you'd only be spending that if this card helps you make money. Now, the pricing claim seems to be from a post here, where we see the 7,377, although it's looking like it's also listed at CompSource for a price of $8,200, which is even more expensive. Anyway, the A6000, which was the previous generation version of this, was apparently priced around $4,500 to $5,000, so still very expensive, but these initial pricing listings we're seeing here for this generation does seem to be a price hike. Now, how about gaming GPUs, and how about AMD? AMD's pricing has been, on their 6000 series looked like, to me, the best Black Friday deals that we saw was on the Team Red. But is their new generation going to be worth looking into? Well, we know their 7900 and 7900 XTX are coming December 13th. AMD's released their performance claims. I've already talked about them in depth, so look at my previous video if you want more thoughts on that. But for a lot of people, $900 to $1,000, like, sure, that's less expensive than a 4080 and a 4090, but when are we getting the mid-range cards? When are we getting something that, is priced at what, high-end cards used to be? So a while back, Angstronomics had a lot of leaks on AMD hardware, and from what we've seen, they've been very accurate. And it's looking like now we're getting some possible confirmation for something that Angstronomics claimed a while ago, which is that there could be a lower core count for the Navi 32 GPU, compared to what some people had been rumoring. So what do I mean by that? And also, what do we even mean by Navi 32? So let me hop down here. Videocards.com has a helpful chart here for this. Okay, so in the GPU space, there's a Navi 31 GPU, and this GPU will also have cut-down versions. And this is the one that's being used in the 7900 and 7900 XTX. Sorry, 7900 XT and XTX. Now, again, one of those is more cut down than the other, and the full Navi 31 GPU could have 96 compute units, right? And then you could cut it down, and then all of your, specs and whatnot get cut down from there. You get fewer processors and all of that. So the Navi 32 GPU, we don't have official graphics card branding names to go with this yet, but you would expect that unless there's an even further cut down Navi 31, which there could be, cut down even further than the 7900 XT, and you then could have a 7800 XT on this Navi 31 die, we don't know. The 7800 branding could go onto the Navi 32 GPU, which, according to these rumors, is now having 30 compute units, and that would bring it down to, 60 compute units, which would be 30 work groups, which is a little bit less than had been rumored in the past. Now again, we don't officially know which cards will go on this. Like I said, the 7800 could be on a further cut down Navi 31, but it's also possible that the 7800 branding this time would be on the Navi 32 die. And this is similar to how NVIDIA this time around didn't use they used their biggest, most powerful GPU on the 4090, but they actually stepped down to a lower class GPU on the 4080, and we saw a larger performance delta between the 4080 and the 4090 than we did between the 3080 and the 3090, because the 3080 was on the same top-end GPU as the 3090. And similarly with AMD's lineup, last gen, the 7900 was class GPUs were on the Navi 21, the highest end one, and so was the 6800 XT. So anyway, I'll be curious if we see these cut down further for the branding names with AMD like we did with NVIDIA. Navi 33 is where you'll get the hopefully a lot more budget-friendly cards, and that's rumored to be at 32 compute units. So you can kind of see well, it doesn't scale quite just linearly here, because as you get fewer units on the die, a lot of times the clock speeds can go higher and things like that. So it's not just as simple as this will have 60 out of 96 performance. It's not quite that simple, but it still gets you a rough idea of what's going on here. But there's all sorts of other things that affect that performance, like the clock speeds and the memory bus and whatnot. Also, Navi 33 is called Hot Pink Bonefish, and I find that pretty funny. Anyway, let's move on. NVIDIA is reportedly ending production of the RTX 2060 and GTX 1660 series graphics cards. This is being reported by WCCF Tech, but they'd mentioned the ending of the 2060 previously. This new report also includes the 16 series being ended as well. And they're, listing more sources from like the Asian supply chain kind of place. So we'll see. Again, this is not an official announcement from NVIDIA, but it would make sense that they'd eventually cut these off. But if you've been looking for a somewhat budget-friendly NVIDIA GPU that's actually new and still in production, the 2060 and 1660 series have been kind of the only place to go. Even the 3050 is pretty overpriced at this point. Anyway, if you're looking into new NVIDIA GPUs, then how about the 4070 Ti? So remember, NVIDIA was originally going to launch two 4080s. They had the 16 gigabyte one, which they did actually launch, and there was going to be a 4080 12 gigabyte, which was significantly cut down in specs. But NVIDIA unlaunched it because they felt the naming was wrong. And all the rumors are pointing to that card being relaunched as a 4070 Ti to better emphasize the performance delta between the 4080 and this GPU. Now, we are seeing leaks of this GPU pictured, and it's looking like it's 25% smaller than GA104. So AD104, again, talking about things like we did with the Navi 31, 32, 33. This is the same kind of idea, but for NVIDIA. AD104 is a smaller and less powerful than AD103, and smaller and less powerful than AD102, where we had the 4090, then we had the 4080, and this is now the unlaunched 4080 12 gigabyte, which will now be a 4070 Ti. We're seeing pictures of it, and GA104 was the previous generation version of this class of GPU. This is looking to be 25% smaller. Looks like that. Where are they getting this from? It's looking like this is from Twitter leaker Megasize GPU. And for comparison purposes, to make the sizing claim, a single GDDR6X memory chip was placed side by side with it. And that would allow you to get the sizing estimation here. Anyway, we'll see what happens with the 4070 Ti. Odds are we'll see it launched probably in January. I'd imagine we'd see it talked about at CES, although it could surprise us and come out in December, because otherwise, there's no official announcement of anything coming from NVIDIA in December. So if they don't want December to go free of new NVIDIA GPUs, I mean, I guess it could come out then, but it wouldn't surprise me if we had to wait till a CES announcement or something like that, which is what a lot of rumors have been pointing towards. Now, speaking of rumors in the 4070 Ti, as well as the Radeon RX 7900 lineup, Gigabyte, a lot of times we see models of upcoming GPUs listed by Gigabyte before they're officially confirmed to even exist. Like the 4070 Ti, to be clear, there's no official word from NVIDIA about that being a thing. However, Gigabyte will file with the European something or other commission, what is it, Eurasian Economic Commission, for their names, right? So the names of their new GPUs. Now, not all of these usually end up making it to market, but what we're seeing here is we're seeing listings for all of these cooler model versions for the 7900 XT and the 7900 XTX. So it's looking like we'll see an Aorus Elite. Is that Aorus or Aorus? I never know. But anyway, I believe that's not their top end. I think we've seen branding of like an Aorus Master on other Gigabyte GPUs, which would be their highest end cooler model. So we're not seeing that listed here. But we are seeing a gaming OC and a gaming and a reference model, it looks like. And then for the XT, not the XTX, that's a little bit confusing, AMD. Anyway, looks like we'll be seeing a gaming OC and a gaming and a reference model. But again, just because these are filed doesn't mean they all necessarily will make it to market. But again, they're filing on the 4070 Ti, which does indicate we will be seeing a 4070 Ti coming out, likely as the next GPU that we see. And like we said, probably it's the same 4080 that got unlaunched with the 12 gigabyte thing. And again, these are listed at 12 gigabytes, further confirming that it would make sense that this is just the artist formerly known as the 4080 12 gigabyte. Here we're seeing an Aorus Master version, as well as an Elite and a gaming OC and a gaming and an Aero OC and an Aero and an Eagle OC and an Eagle. So looking like different cooler model options here than we're seeing here, although there is some overlap. Now, speaking of NVIDIA, how about older NVIDIA GPUs? If you're still holding on to a Kepler graphics card, there was apparently a security loophole that has been closed with some new NVIDIA drivers. So definitely take a look at that if you're hanging on to something like your old 7080 Ti. Make sure you're getting that security update patched. Now, this article is interesting. It's also not in English, so let's take a look at the videocards.com summary of this article, which will help it be a little bit more understandable to me and most of my audience. So Quasar Zone, which was the article I just showed you, did some testing on power limiting a 4090 and undervolting a 4090. These are two different ways to decrease the energy consumption. Power limiting it is just like you open up something like your MSI Afterburner and you reduce the power slider to a lower percentage, whereas undervolting is a little bit more complicated and you have to mess with the voltage curve. Now, that would be more difficult to do for most people, so it would probably only be worthwhile if it gave significantly better results than power limiting, and that's if you even want to bring down the power consumption anyway. And at what kind of performance hit do we take? Now, it looks like they tested Cyberpunk 2077, Marvel Spider-Man Remastered, Forza Horizon 5, Lost Ark, and PUBG Battlegrounds. I still hate they renamed that PUBG Battlegrounds, because wasn't it PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds? That's totally beside the point of this article, whatever. Anyway, all games were tested at 4K with maximum quality. Now, the video cards article here is saying ensuring that the GPU would be the bottleneck, not other components. Now, I'm going to argue with that, actually, and say that Spider-Man Remastered, when it's completely maxed out at 4K, can still be CPU limited, and so can Forza Horizon 5, even on my new 7700X build. So I'm not just talking about my 5950X. Forza Horizon 5 at 4K, completely maxed out, can still be CPU limited. So I'm going to say that could affect the results here, because if you power limit it, and it reduces the GPU performance, but you weren't fully GPU limited, then you would see less reduction in performance. Now, I'm not saying that for sure happened where they were testing and how they were testing, but that could make it look like it's not losing as much performance as it actually is. However, if we overall look at the results here, it actually looks like pretty similar results between the power limit and the undervolts. They don't look drastically different, although they aren't identical. But what's really cool here is either way, you can get down to 232 watts or 268 watts. So, that is a noticeable difference here. It looks like the undervolt is coming down to a lower wattage and at a similar but slightly less performance. But again, it's down to about 94 performance, about 92.4 performance, that kind of a thing. Now, again, depending on the game, depending on the settings, whatever. But the point is, it looks like you can retain much of the performance of the 4090 while reducing the power consumption by over 100 watts, which is pretty cool. Now, I don't talk a lot about Apple here. Believe it or not, at work on my school laptop, as a teacher, they actually gave me an M1 MacBook this year, MacBook Air. So actually, I really do like it for certain things. It's not gaming. There's pros and cons to Apple, but their Apple Silicon is really interesting. And I'm curious if Apple will ever end up in more of a gaming market eventually, long term. We'll see. But anyway, the M2 Max has a leaked benchmark, and it's showing up to 10% single thread performance gains and 20% multi-thread performance jumps versus the M1 Max. If you're interested in that, this appears to be a Geekbench leak. And again, all my sources will be in the description if you want to dive further into anything. Now, the 4080 is having more trouble selling than a lot of people expected, although it still is selling. But they're not always selling out, and we did see it briefly drop below the German MSRP. This is at videocards.com, but they're grabbing the information from PC Games Hardware, which is a German outlet, I believe. And they're saying that the RTX 4080 from Gainward did briefly drop to 1449 euros. Oh boy, what a good deal. But anyway, the MSRP in Germany is apparently 1469. So that is slightly below MSRP, and that's at least a good sign. Anyway, hey, Portal RTX is coming soon. It's coming on December 8th. We saw this heavily announced as part of the RTX 4000 series launch stuff. And it's coming, it'll have full ray tracing and DLSS 3 support. You can still run it on your other GPUs without DLSS 3. But guys, I'm probably going to test this thing out on the channel if I have time. But look at these system requirements, because I am very interested in this. It's looking like, to play this game, let me just pop out of the way. Disappear. Okay, at minimum settings, 1080p 30 FPS, so not minimum settings, graphics settings high, 1080p 30, so minimum recommendation is an RTX 3060, and that's using DLSS. They don't even say what setting, but I'm guessing it's aggressively. Anyway, so I'm just mentioning that 1080p 30 FPS on an RTX 2060. If we pop over to 1080p 60 FPS, you saw that right. That's an RTX 3080 for 1080p 60 using DLSS. And for maxing the game out at 4K 60 FPS with the ultra settings, again, this was down at high. Going up to the ultra settings, you'll need a 4080 using DLSS 3. Now, I would imagine that that's probably DLSS 2 and 3. In other words, using DLSS super resolution to boost your frame rate initially, and then frame generating to almost double the frame rate past that. Like I said, I'm interested in testing this out just kind of as a tech thing to see how demanding ray tracing can get and how the frame generation performs here. Because like I said, in some single player games, I've liked it, like in Plague Tale. But in faster paced ones like Spider-Man, I didn't think the image quality held up in quick motion. Anyway, AMD's upcoming Ryzen 7900 and 7700 CPUs are already listed by some retailers. These are the non-X versions, if you're like, I thought those were already out for sale. These are the non-X versions, which are rumored to be coming out as like 65-watt TDPs. And these rumors seem to be supporting that these are coming soon. Now, I think these pricings could very well just be placeholders at this point, so I don't want to talk too much about this. And the specs could have also been placeholders as well. It's looking like the base frequencies are significantly cut down from the X versions, although the boost frequencies are less significantly cut down. And that could be where you're getting some of that power savings, and whatever. But like I said, I don't want to assume this is all completely accurate because it's not official from AMD yet. Now, Ryzen's PCIe Gen5 NVMe M.2 SSDs seem to be delayed. So when AMD was launching their new AM5 platform, they were talking about PCIe Gen5 support, and I was actually looking into this personally because I just built my PCIe Gen5 AM5 platform computer and all of that, and I was kind of interested in Gen5 NVMe drives. Are they out yet? Well, they're not, and they were supposed to be. Like the announcement had been that they were expected in Q3. Well, Q3 is pretty much over, so that didn't happen. So and this also kind of affects Intel too, because I think Intel is now also supporting PCIe Gen5 on their new platform. Now, speaking of Intel and pricing leaks on CPUs, we're seeing the 13900K S version, which is rumored to be a 6 gigahertz just out of the box CPU and all of that, and this would probably be launched to have a competitor to AMD's expected X3D chips and all of that. Well, it is having a pricing leak along with much of the other lineup. It would put it 22% more pricier than the 13900K at this store, but that doesn't mean that these are accurate. Again, these could just be placeholder listings and pricing, so I don't want to dwell on that for too long. Now, this is kind of interesting if you're interested in small form factor builds like the NUC 13. The Extreme version comes with a 13900K, and you can fit a 4090 into it. This was tested by the Chinese outlet Computer Evaluation Room, and they did run some interesting tests and show the 4090 Founders Edition did fit and was able to stay within 67 degrees Celsius in Furmark, which is pretty interesting. If so, could be a good small form factor thing to look at there if you're interested in that. Now, speaking of going to 6 gigahertz on a 13900K, Gigabyte has their advertised easy overclocking instant 6 gigahertz button. Their BIOS update does seem to be out for that and for the 13900K and 13700K, so you could look into that if you have one of those boards and you're interested. There's some Waterblocks being announced from EK. So ARC A770 and A750 GPUs are getting EK Waterblocks. So you could take a look at that if you're interested. And we're also seeing EK releasing Waterblocks for ASUS's GeForce RTX 4080 TUF and ROG Strix GPUs. So if you got one of those ASUS coolers and it's not doing it for you, you want some water cooling, there's your EK Waterblocks if you're interested. Now, Samsung had Samsung marketing. A bridge between worlds, how Samsung's GDR6W creates immersive metaverse experiences. Can we please not try to market things with metaverse? Anyway, what they're announcing here is faster RAM, GDR6W. And this apparently, they're claiming doubled capacity and performance. But when I tried to read through the marketing fluff here, I see that it seems like they can fit double the capacity into the same size, but it did not seem to be doubling the performance. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding what they mean. So this might need a further look and some independent testing, because this is just some kind of press release. Although I guess if you could fit more capacity into the same size, you could get it closer to the GPU on the actual PCB, reducing latency and helping performance. Anyway, maybe I'm misunderstanding what this is saying, but anyway, there's some kind of new GDR6W memory out from Samsung, so we'll stay tuned and see if that matters at all. Now, at first I was excited to see a new Valve VR patent, but it just looks like it's a controller design that has an adjustable strap for accommodating different sized hands. Anyway, Taidu launched a mini LED gaming display, WQHD, so 3440 by 1440, 165 hertz panel, HDR 2000 rating for only $800. That all sounded very interesting until I read further and saw that this is apparently only available in China. And then my interest died. Anyway, the Witcher 3 Next Gen announcement has come. It's been, it should be coming out soon. And there have already been some videos highlighting the visual improvements, because you can look at the announcement trailer and then look at that side by side with the same scene in the original game. So that's been kind of interesting to look at. So you could follow the link in the description if you want to see more. I'm interested in testing this update out if I have time, but it's looking like it's also reported that the next-gen update probably doesn't fix the 60-plus FPS physics issues that were present in the original game. I'm looking at how long my video already is, so I'm not going to go into detail on this, but the original game had some issues with certain physics elements and things, and it's looking like that looks like it isn't actually patched in this new version. Now, there's also a Witcher remake coming out, not to be confused with that next-gen update. And it's looking like that new Witcher 1 remake is going to be getting a full open world treatment based on statements from CD Projekt themselves. However, it also looks like it's not coming out until after The Witcher 4. So if you were expecting that update coming, that remake coming soon, it's looking like that's not the case, because there was a statement where they're saying that the Witcher remake will take advantage of the new technologies they developed for The Witcher 4 and will come after it and capitalize on those advancements. So longer delay there than some people might have been thinking. Now, Gran Turismo is an interesting console series. It's looking like a PC port, or at least being considered by the developer, although definitely not officially announced or anything like that. Now, Need for Speed Unbound dev is saying that FSR 2.2 is in the game, XeSS may be added, DLSS 3 is in the game, and in their testing, they felt like the latency was not impacting the player experience, but that the overall boost to frame rate was helpful and people liked it. So maybe we'll test that one out. Like I said, I like it in some games, not in others. AMD's FSR 2.1 was added to Saints Row in a recent patch. And AMD's 6500 XT, which did not review well, but is going down to $99 recently, and does come with a free copy of Dead Island 2. This one does not get the Callisto Protocol from that game bundle, but it did go down to $99, although that's only if you count a rebate from the manufacturer, and those can be kind of hit or miss, but could be at least kind of interesting there. And last thing I'll leave you with is that ASUS unveils the ROG Strix Aura Edition ATX 3.0 PSUs for next-gen gaming PCs. So basically, if you're going to be getting one of those NVIDIA GPUs and you don't want all of those dongle, adapter things, power cables going everywhere, making your PC look ugly, here's another option for an ATX 3.0 power supply. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.